and I am the Senior Manager of Policy and Partnerships at Create New South Wales. I'd like to start by acknowledging that although we're all gathered digitally, all of us are present on Aboriginal land somewhere around this vast place we now call New South Wales. And I take the opportunity to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. I am talking from Bidjigal land, and I invite all of you to say who you are and where you're coming from in the comments part of this program. I just wanted to start with a little bit of housekeeping, if that's possible. So the viewing experience and listening experience will be a little bit better if we can all turn off our microphones if we're not speaking, as well as turning off our cameras if that is interfering in your experience of who you can see talking. And we will offer the opportunity to engage with us at different points in this presentation. So the main part of this is that we are going through two sort of issues today. And the first is the current settings for the parts of regional New South Wales that are coming out of lockdown. So what I'm going to do is go through the main points of that of those settings as described by the Deputy Premier last week, and then actually take you through the important parts of the public health order. So then we'll offer an opportunity for questions to those of you in regional New South Wales who want to understand more or to get some clarification on things. And then we'll actually start introduce the roadmap once we reach 70% double dose vaccination. And this is really an opportunity for us to hear from you about the concerns that you have with the information that's just been released. So we understand that a lot of the detail is coming together at the moment, but we have an opportunity to feed back to those who are writing the public health order around this setting, and to get your sort of nuanced feedback into this space. So we seek your questions. Obviously, there's a lot of questions we'll not be able to answer today, but we do hope that we can gather enough data and information from the sector that we can put up some clear responses back to those who are actually drafting this roadmap. So firstly, regional New South Wales. Oh, and sorry, I have forgotten to say that my colleague Ashley Collis, who a lot of you probably deal with in the day-to-day, is also on this call, and she'll be fielding some of the questions that you've already asked, and also helping me with feeding those questions through the comments. So you can give a wave, Ashley, so we know who you are. There she is. Okay, so regions coming out of lockdown are the mid to north coast, to the north coast, to the northwest, Albury to Riverina, and the Murrumbidgee areas. For all other regions, there must not be any cases in the community for 14 days in order to come out of lockdown. So there are rules in this section, which I was hoping to be able to post into the comments, but I don't have access to the comments currently. I'm just going to see if
I'll do that, Beck.
Okay, cool, thanks. So there's a list of rules for a particular area, and you can find the detail there. And the list of LGAs that have the stay-at-home order in place are there as well. So the post-lockdown settings are as follows, and I'll go through the actual public health order after this. So for hospitality venues, you can reopen subject to 1 person per 4 square metres inside and 1 person per 2 square metres outside, with standing while drinking permitted outside. Gyms and indoor recreation facilities can open under the 1 person per 4 square metre rule and can offer classes up to 20 people. And we understand that these settings are the same for dance schools. Indoor entertainment and information facilities, including cinemas, theatres, music halls, museums and galleries, can reopen with 1 person per 4 square metres or 75% fixed seated capacity. So it's 75% where you have a fixed seating arrangement and 1 person per 4 square metres where you do not. And public spaces can have up to 20 people gathering. Masks are mandatory for all indoor public venues, and only hospitality staff will be required to wear a mask when outdoors. Children under the age of 12 will not need to wear a mask indoors. And social distancing is still recommended at 1 person per 4 square metres, or the capacity limits of the particular venue. So now I'm going to close this down and share a different thing, if I can. Oh, can you see my screen?
Yep. Yes.
Great. Oh, that's good. Sorry, I thought I'd lost it. Okay. So when we're looking at the areas of regional New South Wales that have come out of lockdown, this is the part of the order that you need to look at. So it's directions applying to the general area. So this sets out the issues that I've just discussed, but in more detail. So if we go through to the first part of the order that actually covers arts and culture work in particular. So the occupier of the premises in the general area that is an entertainment facility must not allow more persons on the premises than the number of persons equal to 75% of fixed seating capacity of the premises, or 1 person per 4 square metres of space in the premises. And we do understand that the sector would rather see the clarification here that the premises, that it's it is the greater of 75% or 1 person per 4 square metres, and we have sent that feedback back up to New South Wales Health. But this is the situation at the moment in the order for regional New South Wales. The next part is that for a major recreation facility, it's 1 person per 4 square metres or 5,000 people. So it's capped at 5,000. And that people need admission to these premises by way of a ticket, and that they must be assigned specific seats. Now, this is the next piece of information that is particular to our sector, which is that the maximum numbers of persons permitted for an outdoor event are as follows. So for a controlled outdoor public gathering, it's 500 people. For a COVID-19 safe outdoor public gathering, it's 50 persons. And for an unorganised public gathering, it's 20 persons. So we will we'll go back to the websites that offer those COVID-19 guidelines to see how these things play out, and we'll do that over the coming week and make sure that we can address any questions that you have. So I might just go forward to masks. So a person in the general area who's over the age of 12 years of age must wear a fitted face covering while the person is in an indoor premises other than a place of residence. So that's the main issue, and that people need to wear masks if they're working at a hospitality venue and dealing directly with the members of the public. And it's up to the operator of hospitality venues to make sure that people are complying with the rules. There are exemptions or exceptions for people having illness, conditions, or disability. And there are also other exceptions if a person is eating or drinking, engaging in strenuous physical exercise, including a dance class, which is useful for us to know. And if you're engaging in work, if you're communicating with somebody. And usually there's something in here about that the person's work provides that they can take their mask off, but I will just check for that. Oh, here we go. Enunciation or visibility of the person's mouth is essential. Okay, so moving on. Singing or dancing. The good thing about this part of the order is that it is clarified that you are able to undertake singing or dancing if you're in an educational establishment, if you're a performer who's performing, if you're a person engaged in instruction in singing and dancing. So hopefully that covers up a lot of issues that otherwise would be challenging for people. There's also further miscellaneous orders around ensuring that people are seated while they're inside entertainment facilities and that they're seated while consuming alcohol. So those are the main issues around that public health order. So I'll use the opportunity now to stop sharing and engage with particular questions from regional New South Wales. Ash, do you want to?
Yeah, just going back up through those. I've just put some links and some answers to a couple of questions into the comments as well. But I think our first question was from Thomas in relation to, so it's not really regional, it's about when we get into that general area, Beck.
Yeah.
RE seating, is that general admission or reserved seating? And you've addressed specific seating.
It doesn't actually give that level of detail, but it does say that you need to be, let me go back. The devil's always in the detail with these things. Okay, all persons on the premises other than persons engaged with work are assigned to specific seats. So there's the answer to that question.
Amy has commented that I heard that fixed seating was in contention and that seating may not have to be fixed, but as of right now.
As of right now, and what's in the order currently, that's all we can tell you. This is what's legally in place at the moment.
Exactly. Amy also asked, what does controlled mean? And I've put the link to the New South Wales Gov page, which has this answer. So I'll just read out what I copied. Per New South Wales Government, controlled outdoor gathering means an outdoor public gathering in an area enclosed or bounded by fencing or a barrier, and that requires all attendees, except people who are working the event, to have a ticket to attend, and that assigns tickets to specific seats or to a seating area. Question from Imogen, do you have to be masked while singing?
I think you could go back to the fitted face coverings order and actually look at those exceptions. Where you are, where the enunciation or the visibility of the person's mouth is essential.
From Tim, for clarity, does 75% seated capacity of the premises actually mean of the individual theatre performance venue? What
Correct.
happens if the premises has multiple performance spaces?
It's 75% of that venue, so it would be 75% of each of the performance spaces.
Carissa has asked, can we have an acting class or workshop? Do you need to wear a mask to do an acting class?
Again, I'd go back to the enunciation part of the exception, and I think that probably answers that question.
Stephen has asked, are children on a carer's lap counted in the allowed total?
No. I will go back to that to see if there's detail, but in previous iterations of the public health order, it has been children are counted, but if we go into this particular part of the order, it may be that they haven't actually assigned that limit to it. I'll get some more information from New South Wales Health on this, but it has usually been the case that children have been counted in the capacity. But if you were going to read the letter of the law, which this is, then they would be counted. But I can seek further clarification on that.
Back. A question from, I have that question in our other document as well, so we've got that. A question from Kate: what are the rules around singing performers at an event, such as a single singer and/or guitar and singer duo performing at a gallery event? Are rules different from indoor or outdoor?
The only advice that we have around this is what I've just conveyed, which is that you can perform and rehearse in terms of singing. And there aren't any other guidelines around how many singers, distances, all of the things that we had in place last year. Those don't appear. It just seems to be a blanket exception.
Question from Ashley: what about speeches or presenting? For example, an exhibition tour where the tour guide is wearing a mask, or when someone is presenting to a group, for example, 30 people, do they need to wear a mask?
If you're asking that question again, I would say it's about enunciation. If that person is able to be understood while wearing a mask, then they should wear a mask. But if they're not able to be understood while they're wearing a mask, then they're able to take the mask off.
Question from Roslyn: I'm on the Central Coast, which is now regional, but does not appear on the list of areas coming out of lockdown. Can I access the list of areas coming out, please? Roslyn, I will post that link into the chat box as soon as we're done with question time, just so I'm not flicking back and forth, but that does list all the areas coming out of lockdown.
Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome. Question from Georgia: in regards to capacity, can I please clarify whether or not a rehearsal space will have a specific capacity, or will we abide by the 4 per square metre?
1 per 4 square metres, I'd suggest.
From Sally: what is our responsibility in terms of checking mask exemptions?
I think there's nothing in the health order, so you'd need to undertake to have your own policy in place. Let me just check. I will check. But I do think that I read that it is the person who runs the venue is responsible for making sure that those. So in terms of hospitality venues, those people need to make sure that their staff are complying with the mask order. But I think, I don't think that there's other clauses around that. So you would need to basically develop a policy around how you deal with people. And I think this is going to be it's going to be a challenging thing coming up, I think, for everyone coming out of lockdown, is that there's a lot of anger in certain sectors of the community about mask wearing and vaccination. And we recognise at Create that this will have an impact on front of house staff. And we need to sort of understand how we can support organisations to deal with this, either through some kind of supportive material or through asking for additional clauses within the public health order. But we are trying to get these issues at least heard at that level.
Thanks, Beck. Sally here. I noticed that in the public health order, as you scrolled past, it said that people have to provide documentation to police, but it doesn't say about whether they have to provide documentation to anyone else. So it'd be good to get clarity on that.
Well, I think they do have to. I think that's what's in the law, but there isn't anything else here that would compel someone, I guess, to lawfully produce material. But as venue managers, you would be able to deny entry to people if they don't produce evidence, for instance.
Thank you.
Okay, so just moving to the next question from Jane. Are there any restrictions around audience distance from singers and performers to each other on stage?
There is no detail around that at all.
From Carrie Ann, in relation to masks for performers engaged in playing musical instruments, for example, wind and brass, we would like to see this addressed in New South Wales guidelines, preferably listed as an exception.
I think it is in terms of enunciation. I think you can't play a clarinet with a mask on. So I would suggest that it's already there.
From Mark, will a professional, sorry, the screen has moved on me. Will a professional exemption be granted as was in place previously?
Will exemptions be granted?
I think that's the intention, yes. Will a professional exemption be granted as was in place previously?
I think the exemptions portal is always open. So if you require an exemption from something in the public health order, you can always go through the exemptions portal for this particular order.
Jono has just provided some info with the children counting towards capacity. He said babes in arms, children on laps have always been counted as they are still people.
Yep. Okay.
So from Peter, so Peter sent this question through previously as well, so we'll address it now. He's working as a content creator for a multifunction exhibition venue in Newcastle, which is now closed, as they're under stay-at-home orders, and obviously will be for the foreseeable future. The venue has proper COVID-safe plans in place. The venue would like to continue to offer exhibitions under a click and collect model where the artist will come in and hang the show, being the only person there. A day later, Peter would come in for photographing the stills and providing 360 footage. He can then continue to work from home, create a 360 virtual tour with the artworks then available for purchase online via click and collect. Is this allowed or possible under the current legislation, or are we going to get into trouble?
No, it is allowed. You are able to undertake work that cannot be undertaken from home. And certainly there's a lot of organisations that are pivoting into digital in this way. We have some access to some useful resources from Screen Australia, which are because a lot of people are sort of moving into a situation where they're either photographing or filming something. So these are probably useful resources because we are sort of looking at that sort of space of, a person or a very small crew going in and taking pictures and then putting them up online. But it's very much, you are able to do that. The main issue is that a lot of organisations are undertaking this kind of work. However, they have neighbours and other people who are calling the police on them, saying that they're doing things incorrectly. So you just need to be aware of the fact that you may encounter, if what you're doing ends up sort of drawing attention to you, then you're likely to have someone calling the police to challenge why you're doing what you're doing. And unfortunately, some of these situations are interpreted differently. But you are, under the public health order. I think people run into problems when they explain to police that they're exempt. An exemption is a very specific thing. You actually have to apply for it. But if what you're doing is allowed under the public health order, that's what you need to explain. But if you say you're exempt or you've got an exemption, they'll ask to see your documentation of that exemption.
So the next, I'm going to combine the question from Amy and the answer from Jono. He's very kindly provided some insight. So Amy has said, sorry to go back to fixed seating, which is fine. What happens if the event is outdoors where there is no fixed seating? And Jono's provided that my seating is fixed as in fixed to the floor, but it is a fixed capacity even with single seats, and he sees fixed as being allocated, which is what we work off.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so if you don't have that, if you have a situation where people are not assigned to specific seats, then you're looking at those much lower numbers within the public health order, either 50 or 20.
From Michael, what are the allowances for rehearsal? It's clear for performance, but not pre-performance gatherings.
1 per 4 square metres, mask wearing where possible.
From Linda, so very much same vein, band rehearsals, no need for masks, still need to be 1.5 metre apart.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're playing a string instrument or another instrument that doesn't need to use your mouth, then you should be wearing a mask.
Janelle's just mentioned, is anyone else not hearing the questions? I'm hoping you can all hear me asking the questions. If you're having, okay, thank you, lots of nods. If you're having audio problems, you can log out and log back in, which I know is a pain, and we are recording this, so you will get all the information eventually. So I have listed the link for the LGAs in and out of lockdown as well. That's now in the chat box. Okay, sorry, just have to scroll down. From Kieran, I thought the orders require paperwork for exemptions to imply that we can and should ask someone why they are not wearing a mask.
Yes, I think people in general that that aren't wearing a mask for legitimate reasons generally do have that material on them. But if you're dealing with someone who's an anti-masker, I guess that's a different situation. But how you tell the difference between the two is that it is challenging. We do understand this, but I think it's at this point you would need to develop policies that you feel like your organisation can follow to keep you and your staff and other patrons safe.
Exactly. From Bronwyn, will there be any regulations in place similar to mask wearing on event organisers checking vaccination status in regional areas?
Vaccination status is not part of the public health order yet. That will come into effect once we get to that 70% vaccination point, which is the stuff that I'm going to be talking about just after this. So there's a lot of unknown around that and how that will be managed and whether it will be mandated in the public health order or not. There's still a lot of things that we don't know.
Imogen has asked, can I clarify if it's 4 metres square capacity? Is it up to 20 people indoors or more if the capacity allows?
It'll be more if the capacity allows, yeah.
From Andrew, are there any guidelines as to whether rapid response testing will be required for rehearsals and or performances?
Again, I think it's something that organisations are undertaking to do themselves to give some level of surety to being able to proceed with work. But presently, it's really the major companies that are able to do this, I think, because the cost of the tests are quite prohibitive. And even a lot of the major organisations that we support don't use rapid antigen testing because they can't afford it. So I think this is going to be an issue as we move forward with the pandemic. Obviously, you know, we've got friends in different countries that have access to their own, like, you know, that you can buy from the drugstore rapid antigen tests. And maybe this is something that's going to be available in Australia in the future. But at the moment, it's undertaken on a case-by-case basis with pathology clinics in a commercial kind of sense.
A question from John. Are we leaving ourselves open to litigation if someone has purchased tickets and are refused admission if they refuse to wear a mask, or if we refuse to accept exemptions on a total no mask, no admission policy?
I think it depends on how you go out to your market with your ticket policy. So one of the things that we talked about last year, and might be useful for us to get an expert in on this again, we did work with someone from Live Performance Australia to talk through this kind of ticketing policy issue. And I think it might be something that you would undertake to do for your organisation, but you would very clearly make that part of when people purchase a ticket, you make it part of the terms and conditions through which they buy that ticket from you.
From Mark, so no general professional exemption for the industry. Last time, individual organisations did not have to apply. It was granted to the industry.
Apply for?
It's just a professional exemption. I'm not ringing bells.
I'm not familiar with what you're talking about.
Right. Mark, if you wanted to put more detail into the chat box, we can address, but we've always dealt with exemptions on it's their case by case. We didn't really have any profession-wide. Just while we wait for that, Georgia, you mentioned earlier that venue holders can deny access to a person who is not wearing a mask. Is there currently anything stating that a company hiring a rehearsal venue can deny someone access to a rehearsal space? For context, the musical society I represent hires a rehearsal studio. If that studio are happy to have people in the venue without a mask, but the society who is rehearsing is not happy to, is the society within its right to turn, to turn a person away from the venue or rehearsal space?
Well, if the society is letting people into the venue without a mask, then they're breaking the law. So it's the public health order that people going inside of venues that aren't their own house, that they have to wear a mask.
Kerry Ann has just said, apologies to clarify, my question was about expectations, necessity of masks for string players on stage, which we've addressed. Hayley, what does this paragraph mean for youth performing arts classes? Non-vaccinated young people aged under 16 will be able to access all outdoor settings, but will only be able to visit indoor venues with members of their household.
Yeah, so that's part of the next part of this webinar, which I probably should get onto soon. So unless there's other burning questions, we might move on to the next part of the webinar.
I can keep going through these while you present, Beck, and see what I can answer.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking in the interest of time, if we go on to the next section and I can address other questions. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to reshare. Sorry, excuse me everyone while I fiddle around. Okay, moving on to the roadmap. So I'm just going to talk you through what we know, because there's a lot that we don't know, and we are using this opportunity to clarify some of those unknowns and actually take this information up to the people who are writing the direction around the roadmap. And obviously, you know, the public health orders, they have to cover a whole range of activities. So we aren't going to get super specific, nuanced material around every single art form, but we can hope to get some clarity on some of the issues in a broader sense that people are finding difficulty with. So this is what we know from the press conferences and from the media releases that we've got from the Premier's office. Only fully vaccinated people and those with medical exemptions will have access to the freedoms allowed under the reopening New South Wales roadmap. The freedoms for vaccinated adults will come into effect on the Monday after New South Wales hits the 70% double dose target. This will include gatherings in the home and public spaces. Up to 5 visitors will be allowed in a home where all adults are vaccinated, not including children 12 and under. And up to 20 people can gather in outdoor settings. This is what we know about venues, including hospitality, retail stores and gyms. Hospitality venues can reopen subject to 1 person per 4 square metres inside and 1 person per 2 square metres outside, with standing while drinking permitted outside. Retail stores can reopen under the 1 person per 4 square metres rule, and unvaccinated people will continue to only be able to access critical retail. Personal services such as hairdressers, etc., are capped at 5 clients per premises. Gyms and indoor recreation facilities can open under the 1 person per 4 square metre rule and can offer classes for up to 20 people. So these are the settings we imagine for dance schools. Sporting facilities can reopen. For stadiums, theatres and major outdoor recreation facilities, major recreation outdoor facilities including stadiums, racecourses, theme parks and zoos can reopen with 1 person per 4 square metres, capped at 5,000 people. Up to 500 people can attend ticketed and seated outdoor events. Indoor entertainment and information facilities including cinemas, theatres, music halls, museums and galleries can reopen with 1 person per 4 square metres or 75% fixed seating capacity. On masks, masks will remain mandatory for all indoor public venues, including public transport, front of house hospitality, retail and business premises, on planes and at airports. Only hospitality staff will be required to wear a mask when outdoors. Children aged under 12 will not need to wear a mask indoors. Non-vaccinated young people aged under 16 will be able to access all outdoor settings, but will only be able to visit indoor venues with members of their household. Employers must continue to allow employees to work from home if the employee is able to do so. There will be revised guidance on isolation for close and casual contacts who are fully vaccinated, with details to be provided closer to the reopening date. So that basically comprises what we know. And so there have been a lot of, we've got a lot of feedback already on these settings and the requirement for particular nuance. And we are hoping to be able to share this with those who are drafting the plan currently. So yes, over to you with questions on the roadmap.
Okay, just going to scroll back up to questions. Do you want me to find roadmap specific questions first, Beck, and then we can?
Yeah, roadmap specific, I think.
Okay. Sorry, just trying to read.
Excuse me, Beck, can I just ask, will the presentation be available online?
Yes,
please.
will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Beck, there's really no roadmap related questions.
Okay.
At the moment. Oh.
Yeah, just a roadmap related question. Sorry to bounce in there, but that last slide you were on mentioned that under 16s could only attend indoor venues with members of their household. How does that apply with like student acting classes, drama, dance, etc.?
I think in terms of student acting classes, we will defer to what the education department is providing. But, you know, under the current framework, I imagine it would be sort of 1 per 4 square metres. And that's your main sort of, you know, for the venue, that's the main area that governs what you can do.
The questions are coming in hard and fast now, so, and it's going to be a lot about the under 16s, like we suspected. From Jane, does the under 16s only allowed indoors with family members mean that under 16s cannot perform?
That level of detail obviously is not present at the moment. So I think it would depend on the context. So I imagine that you're talking about sort of like an end of year performance and that kind of activity, or activities related to the education department. Normally, as with the previous health order, there are exceptions for people who are performing. So, and it does depend on the context in which you're, I guess, giving classes to young people. And this is all part of the stuff that we'll send back up to the people drafting the plans, so that we can get better detail around those.
From Tweed Regional Museum, will it be mandatory for staff to be vaccinated if we are asking visitors to be vaccinated, and by extension mandatory for our volunteers to be vaxxed? And this is a question we've had via email too.
Yeah, and look, in terms of whether it's going to be actually mandated or not, we're still trying to understand that, and there's obviously lots of questions about that. But all of the conversations that we've been having have been around everybody being vaccinated in that context. And so I guess I think with independent organisations, it's much, I think, easier to be able to mandate or enforcing particular things in the workplace. There are sort of there's workplace health and safety legislation that needs to factor into this. So we're trying to understand whether the mandate will come through in the health order, because that would be more useful to all of the sector if so. Yeah, so we're hoping for that to be the outcome, but we're still keen to know what that will be.
Beck, it's Justin here from CRH. I might be able to help. I was on a Do New South Wales call on Friday, and Minister Ayres said the public health order would require all attendees on site to be vaccinated. So I think the public health order will save us there.
Yeah. So I think it's, without the public health order managing that, it's going to be quite challenging, I think. So we anticipate that it will be part of the health order. Yeah. Thanks, Justin.
Just going through, there's some questions that people emailed prior to the webinar, and they're coming through again, and some I can email back because we've already addressed. Just quickly, Tim has asked, are artists allowed to deliver artworks for an art prize to an area in lockdown, not an area of concern? I assume this is considered work, however, they may be an amateur. Like we've discussed before, if it's work that can't be done from home, it can be done. All guidelines must be followed as long as they're not going to an area of concern.
Yeah, and I think even with the, with the sort of issue of, if you need to go somewhere like a doctor's or to a shop or something that's outside of your zone, you're still able to do that under the public health order if the thing that you need or that you need to deliver isn't available in your area.
Yeah. So just looking at some of the other questions that we've received. So there's questions that we can't answer at the moment, like Becca's mentioned about what stage will the following be allowed under the plan, such as, when certain things will come into the roadmap, and we'll keep everybody updated as we get that information. I've just been asked, does Create New South Wales know when, I assume Create New South Wales has no further information about when other New South Wales areas, particularly Greater Sydney, will open up. We don't have that information, unfortunately. So we're getting some comments about things that can we feed back to I guess the Premier's office and working groups about what should be in the orders going forward, and that's, like we've said, the purpose of today, to take all that feedback on.
Yeah, so if you do need to email either of us, if you've got something specific, just understand though that you know, while there can be nuance in the public health order, it's also trying to cover a whole range of activities. So we'd hope to get some changes and additions into the plan through our through this work, but we can't guarantee.
Some questions from Brett that I think fall into the category of we can't really answer right now because we don't have that information, but I'll read the first one. What is the legal situation for the facility if people refuse to comply with vaccination entry requirements? And we're thinking very much about volunteer-run facilities and volunteer front of house staff.
So is it the concern that the staff won't follow the orders, or that the staff have to enforce the orders? So I think, I mean, if we anticipate that or we hope that the mandate for vaccinations will be within the public health order, then they can sort of utilise that order to be the reason that they can't allow entry. But we also obviously are taking on concerns about the level of threat to people that are attending those areas.
Yes, and Brett has said enforcing the order for visitors by front of house and staff, and there is the fear that you'll be met with a volatile audience.
Yeah.
I
mean, I would hope that we can come up with a template to help support, and that New South Wales Health and others will come up with templates to support the workplace to enforce vaccination orders.
Another one from Brett that came in a bit earlier. LGAs that are coming out of lockdown on the 11th of September, or came out of lockdown, will be allowing both vaccinated and unvaccinated people a certain range of freedoms for the moment. Once the state hits the 70% threshold, will unvaccinated people in these regions then need to revert back to lockdown limits? And will the state government clearly communicate this?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, so we've been told that is exactly what will happen, is that there'll be no sort of general areas at that point. It'll be everybody contained under the same health order.
Question from, I'm just switching back to the chat function. Question from Bronwyn, is there any clarity on the 70% vaccination rates and whether restrictions will be different in what is permitted, who can enter between regional areas and Greater Sydney?
I think you just answered my question.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think you did just now, so that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, more questions about the under 16, which we will capture all these questions and we will just have to find out more information. Is there any knowledge if the PHO will be available before the 70% vax target is met?
We can only point to past precedent, I think, with this. We don't know, but we've never been able to. That hasn't been the case. I think because it's legislation, it actually gets signed off. You can't sort of see an advance copy. It gets signed off and it goes into action. So unfortunately, no. But I do hope that the actual roadmap will have more information in it.
Something to feedback, asking that when the PHO is done, could it be clear about workers and volunteers? So if it says that staff must be vaccinated, can volunteers be named as well? Like Beck said, it won't always be able to cater to every single.
I think if it might end up being the case that the public health order says something that, you know, as Justin suggests, that it's basically all participants in this activity must be vaccinated, whether you're volunteer, audience, performer, anyone that comes together in that space must be vaccinated.
And one of the last one of the previous PHOs did have in the definition section, it said workers also means volunteers. So I think that they'll do very similar.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always a good idea to check that there's usually a couple of schedules at the back of every public health order that actually gives a more detailed list of some of the definitions.
Jamie has asked, will there be guidelines around at what point we determine if a ticket buyer is vaccinated?
At the point of entry. So my understanding from all of the press conferences is that your QR check-in system will tell you instantly whether someone's checked in and whether they're vaccinated. So that would be at that sort of QR code check-in.
Katrina has asked, do theatre numbers only refer to audience or to total venue numbers, including cast and crew?
So if it's 75% capacity, you'll be 75% ticketed and seated, and everybody else who's in the venue is counted except for workers. So anyone who's on stage, back of house, manning the tickets, that's not counted in capacity and never has been.
Ian has asked, this is a question for now, not post 70%, which is great. For community theatre rehearsals, can cast travel outside their LGA more than 5 kilometres?
I do not know. I would suggest that for now, if you're in a lockdown area, I would suggest no. Because we're under stay-at-home orders, so yeah.
From Hayley, she says, apologies if I missed it earlier, but did it get discussed that performers on stage must adhere to the 1 per 4 square metre rule as in capacity? No.
No, that hasn't ever been the case either. If you're a performer, then obviously there's, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about people doing social distancing within theatres and doing settings in a different way. And obviously when there was more focus on aerosol transmission, there were more, you know, more caveats around who needed to be distant from whom within a band, and special conditions for wind players. But I think in this case there isn't the detail. So if there isn't the detail prohibiting something, then it means that you can do the thing. So there's no specific detail around prohibiting those activities. There's more actual clarification that you can do some of those things. So
from Mark, if LGAs get locked down again, will the current authorised worker arrangements return, or will this be more flexible for work that cannot be done from home, for example, rehearsal or performance, cast or crew?
Yeah, we've been trying to make some changes up there with who's on that list. Obviously, it doesn't include a range of activities. I think at the moment, because of the focus being on like work and essential work, it's really been focused on people that are, you know, rehearsing because they're part of a show and they're all getting paid and those sorts of things, because we are in hard lockdown at the moment. But I would hope that this is different when we come out of lockdown.
A question, is there any news on the lockdown Sydney LGAs being unlocked with the 70% target being reached, or will these areas have a different target? So I assume you mean the areas of concern with higher rates.
What we've heard is that everybody will fall under the new public health order. However, if there seems to be surging cases, in particular LGAs, you may get limited to your movement. So your activity will still be able to take place, but only within your LGA. So you may still be able to go to the shops or the hairdressers, but only within your LGA. So if you have tickets to the theatre in Sydney and you live in another LGA that's under this kind of lockdown, you won't be able to see that show. So from the press conferences, this is what we understand to be how restrictions will operate after the 70% vaccination is reached. So it's basically if areas are seen to have a growth in transmission, then those areas will be limited. So people will be limited within those areas, but the activities will remain the same.
From Stephen, can Create please help other agencies to understand that where there is ambiguity in the PHO, venue managers, council officers, etc., often default to the most narrow definition and use this to refuse bookings. Yep. This would largely be eliminated if health provider clarifications around the fixed seating definition, distance, separation, etc.
Yep. Okay. Yes, we'll take this up. I mean, we take these issues up all the time, and so we're trying to get clarity on the biggest sort of legal issue would seem to be the greater of 75% or 1 per 4 metre squared. And yes, the definition around what is fixed seating capacity. I mean, my interpretation of a fixed seating capacity is that you've got a seating arrangement that people aren't able to sort of move around as they get into the space, and they have a ticket that allocates them to a particular seat. But if you're going to do another sort of setting, like if you're going to do cabaret or something else, then you have to abide by the 1 person per 4 metre square rule.
Question: at a chapel, the current rules for weddings are 5 wedding party and 5 guests. Is the operator of, for example, sound or live streaming as a worker at the chapel included in either of those groups?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Can you read it again? Sorry.
No, it's all right. So at a chapel, the current rules for weddings, there are 5 wedding party people and 5 guests. So is the operator of, say, the sound or live streaming included in either of these groups? No,
I would suggest that people are allowed to have whatever number of guests. That's the 5 guests. They're able to have 5 guests. Yeah.
Just feedback from Vanessa following on from your point, Beck, about us trying to get some extra options into essential workers, that this is really important in the case of a snap lockdown, because often it's the key artist or technician who allows the show to happen.
No, we 100% understand that. We're sort of dealing with this issue across the performing arts sector as well as the film industry at the moment, because both, and you know, you're behind the scenes, all your technicians, people that work in galleries, are currently not listed, and you know, as more places have moved into lockdown, it's shut down a lot of programs and projects that were sort of happening behind the scenes.
Yep. I've got some feedback that Hayley has asked a question twice, but I can't see it. So Hayley, I'm very sorry. If you could pop it in the chat box now, happy to read it out. I'm not ignoring it. The stream just moves really quickly. So while I wait for Hayley's question, Scott has asked, can we have an enforceable definition of medical exemption for mask wearing and being fully vaccinated to enter?
Yeah, I mean, that would be the hope coming into the public health order, that there'd be some way or some clarification around the responsibilities of venue owners and patrons in getting into venues and producing the right sort of information.
Okay, so I've found Hayley's question. So can we expect Create New South Wales to provide more information about the non-vaccinated young people aged under 16 paragraph in relation to them attending their extracurricular youth dance drama classes outside of a school setting?
Yeah, this is always a bit of a challenge, because it sort of falls between different areas that sort of legislate and look after this space, but we'll do our best to put these issues up to people defining the public health order, because we do understand that, you know, young people are creative people in their own right, and they aren't always going to things with their mums and dads. and it's good to have definition around what kinds of things can take place beyond the, beyond the school curriculum. So I think it'll be pretty clear about what's able to happen at school and on school grounds, but then it's that sort of in-between space.
And we've received a lot of questions via email in the same vein, like Becca said, singing, dance, drama, but also attending, say, Art Gallery New South Wales or different institutions as part of the school group, but it's outside the school, and that's what we're feeding back as well to get that clarification for those under 16, unvaccinated, need to be with a family member, that paragraph.
Yeah, and we sort of also get the feeling that that kind of excursion isn't going to be on the cards for, at least this next term, and probably will come into play in 2022.
Carrie Ann, I'm involved with a University of the Third Age whose presentations are held in the Salvation Army Church conference room or auditorium church space. Will we need to have all our members attending to be allocated a ticketed seat?
Yes, unless you want to go 1 per 4 square metres.
So Mark asked a question which seemed to have disappeared. And
well, actually, on the University of Third Age, it really depends on, I think it depends on the definition of that venue, I guess. So it may be that it falls under community spaces. We don't have the detail around this stuff at the moment because everything's changed since this lockdown. We don't have that sort of same suite of guidelines for particular venues, but you'd need to follow the legislation as it applies to the particular venue that you'll be in, I think, unfortunately.
So a question from Mark, which Tim has asked us to clarify, and I hope I've got your question right, Mark. How can we consider investing money to produce shows and open up if there is the potential of future shutdowns if, for example, a cast member is in a newly locked down area due to a surge? What guarantees can be given? Can any be given? How are the big musicals looking at this? Any suggestions that cast should somehow remain in a bubble?
Yeah, so I think, those questions of bubbles have come up a lot, and this is the way that it seems that quite a number of the sort of more major organisations will be operating, at least to try to limit those transmission cases. But I think, as was in my final slide, they are looking at, what are the settings? If there's someone that comes into the venue or someone gets covered, or what are the protocols that are followed after that? And so we don't know those answers yet. And obviously that's a huge issue for the performing arts sector, especially for people with, running events with multiple cast and crew, short seasons, long seasons. All of those things get impacted enormously by the presence of transmission. And I think it's one of those things that we actually haven't experienced. I don't think that there has been a case of transmission inside a theatre. And so we're now moving into a situation where, we are approaching a situation where the possibility of people getting COVID may increase. So we need to have settings that accord with that situation. And there is discussion among other groups that are talking about perhaps delaying until 2022.
Okay. So I was just checking if there were any email questions that we haven't addressed. There are some, but they are all either about the under 16s or about the future PHO mandating vaccinations, which we've addressed, and we don't know yet what it will exactly say.
But we will be taking these questions on. So we record this, we take a transcript of the questions that have been asked. And so we'll be putting these into themes and sending them up the chain so that hopefully we can get some issues addressed.
I'm just scrolling back to see if we've missed any because there are no new questions. From Jane. Any ideas of what will change at 80% vaccination?
We don't know. That's the truth. We don't know.
Megan has asked, early in 2021, we had guidance for professional arts organisations, and the link is there. Will this be updated to reflect the new restrictions?
Yeah, so we've got a big website update to do, and we've finished drafting that. Obviously, we're waiting on a lot of material to come through, but we will update things as they manifest, and also just make sure that we've got links to current information and not old information. So we're just hurrying up with that this week.
Yeah, and Megan's link is from the New South Wales Health website. So exactly that. Once that's updated, we can actually then update ours. Scott has said, can I suggest allocated seating may be better than saying fixed seating, which we can feed back if that seems to be a concern.
Yep.
Andrew, is there a timeline for when we may hear about the extension of the box office subsidy?
I think shortly. Sorry, I can't be more clear on that.
We did have a question via email about, and I'm sorry, I can't see who it was from at the moment. Do we know if Service New South Wales, from Benjamin at Palace Cinemas, will Service New South Wales maintain JobSaver payments for the duration of the restricted trading period? And we don't.
Yeah, we don't know, but we'll aim to find out. Got quite a few questions of Service New South Wales at the moment.
From Francis, you were asking if fully vaxxed people can rehearse before the 70% target is reached for professional groups.
I think if you're doing work that can't be undertaken from home, then you can do that work currently. But if you are in a lockdown area that you can't move away from, then you're not on the essential workers list. So it depends on where you are.
I think that is it at the moment, Beck. I'm sure there are some we've scrolled past, but like Becca said, we take the transcript and we can, when we send the recording out, we can address in that email anything that we missed, and you can email us at any time. Scott has said, would it make sense for you to have another session like this with someone from Service New South Wales present so we can ask them appropriate questions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're trying to set up a suite of webinars where we do get people in with areas of expertise to offer their ideas and support, or particular processes. We do know that Service New South Wales are currently, they are dealing with enormous amounts of work, and recognise obviously that it's been challenging for a lot of people to get through to those services, but they are having to deal with the most dire need first, unfortunately. But we are trying to get a few answers from Service New South Wales at the moment, but I think once we're in a sort of better position, we can probably get them on board.
That was it.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Obviously, Ashley and I are contactable. I'll just share my screen again so that you can take down our numbers if you need to.
I'll put our email addresses in the chat box now.
Thanks very much, everyone. It's a long session. I hope you're going all well. We know that it's a really very challenging time at the moment, and when you have sort of some information but not all of the information, it's very confusing and challenging, and we do hope to help bring some clarity over the coming weeks. So stay tuned, and we'll do some more webinars shortly. Thanks very much for coming today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.